Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Native Researcher. We are continuing with our discussion on aspects of research from the African perspective. This is our third lesson, and in this lesson, we bring to a close issues related to research philosophy, which we have touched on extensively to this point. Now, in the previous two lessons, I talked about aspects of why we do research, and we explained the challenges that we have in explaining meaning, in showing why subjective experiences differ from third-party experiences. And in the second installment, we talked about how to bring these two together and tell a powerful story, a story that could be convincing based on the scientific method. Now, generally, these methods that I've been talking about and the issues that I've been highlighting have been concretized in education research and explained as the ways in which we see the world, that is, the worldviews. So in this shorter video, I'm just going to conclude the ideas of research philosophy by explaining the different worldviews that exist, which you already know, but maybe you may not know the names. So what do we mean by a worldview? This is usually what we call a paradigm. A paradigm can be traced using what we call ontology. Ontology meaning the way in which I see the world. Remember, initially I talked about subjective experiences. People who see the world based on slicing up the many qualia of reality and then grouping those that are common to give a singular picture that is based on common perspectives of everyone. That is a worldview. And then we also have the ways in which they graduate the worldview. How do you know that you know? This is what we call epistemology. What are the parameters that make us agree that you're telling the truth? And then because of the way we see the world, because of the way we graduate the world, then we have a methodology, which is a plan of how to undertake activities when we seek knowledge. And finally, within the methodology, you have the methods, the actual processes that you're going to undertake to go and look for the information. This is usually informed by ethics, which you usually call the axiology, the axels. Where does the researcher belong? So the axiology usually explains why a researcher behaves in a certain way as they do a particular study or as they seek certain knowledge. So the ontology, the epistemology, the methodology, the methods, and the axiology, all these are the components of a philosophy, a worldview. Now, the common philosophy is based on the scientific method, which we already highlighted, slicing up qualia into pieces that are the same, and then we put them together, and we call this the scientific method, or what we call the positivist paradigm. It argues that things should be objective, so its ontology is positivism. The ontology assumes that reality is what it is. It is always there. It is only for the human to discover. And the epistemology is based on objectivism. So we argue that we know what we know if we work on third-party consciousness. We've already talked about this. Now, the weakness with this is that when it comes to the methods, it will use those methods related to quantitative information, making sure that if it is not sensory based, we do not believe it. We've already talked about this as well. That's positivism. It is weak because it fails to understand those aspects that may not be quantitative in nature. It cannot sneak into the human brain and understand what's happening. So hence, we have post-positivism. I've put a snippet where I explain the differences in both of them. Post-positivism now allows for reality to be constantly checked. Checked, right? So in a chess game. Checked meaning that it is the constant cynic, making sure that we do not take everything at face value. And it also allows for ideals of them subjective experiences to be considered, unlike the pure positivism. Then we've got the alternative side, which is the interpretivist paradigm, which now, instead of third-party experiences, focuses on first-party experiences, where it wants to deal with the subjective matter and understand it from a subjective dimension. So the worldview is reality is as many as the people who are available to experience the subjective experiences. And the epistemology is subjectivism. So when we do such research, we're usually looking for deeper, thicker descriptions, qualitative information. In this worldview, unfortunately, it is very difficult to get a consensus of what reality is, but it will always give you a deep description of what is happening. In the methodology, you rarely get quantitative dimensions. Most of the methodology is going to be qualitative, ethnography, phenomenology, and so on. I've already highlighted this in the snippet that I put out as well. You also have what I have called post-qualia views related to historical ideas that have been brought up by people, and then the need to question these ideas, which is what you call critical theory or the critical worldview, where you want to question historical dimensions brought about by positivists, post-positivists, interpretivists. You are arguing that you always have to try and get a change that equalizes the world and makes it a better place. Unfortunately, this sort of research does not have a particular dimension or a particular foundation. It is rooted in the question and the knowledge of what is, and the need to try and change what is. There are new methodologies and new paradigms which are now in play. For instance, there is a lot of talk about paradigms such as postmodernism, which argues that it is not always the idea that science or interpretivism should come from the external world. It is not possible to understand what a person is actually thinking, doing. So we are actually interested in the information that is coming from the thinking person and nature, the deep parts of nature that we cannot understand. So these sort of worldviews allow us to start dealing with those unseeable things and allow for expression that was beyond positivism, post-positivism, interpretivism, and critical analysis. Because now we allow people to express themselves in different ways. This opens ways for the arts, which previously were very difficult to deal with scientifically because they seemed to be very subjective. But because of postmodernism, we are now able to have expressions in poetry, expressions in literary codes, and so on. This brought in a different way of looking at things. It allowed people to start writing in the first person, I, brought in the subjective experiences together with the ways in which this person feels, and allowed the arts to be analyzed deeper from a scientific perspective. Similarly, we've got multi-pragmatic research, which is still dealing with the ideas of qualia that we spoke of, but now bringing all the different types of paradigms together, meshing them up, and allowing an individual to self-introspect and understand things from various ontologies, epistemologies, and axiologies. So, this was the closing lesson generally of what I've been talking about when we discuss research philosophy. Go to the native researcher, theevident.com, and look at the snippet that I put up for deeper explanations of what I'm talking about. But always know that what we've been trying to explain are the world views, the ways in which people see things.